Welcome, future teachers. Today's explainer is going to bridge the gap between advanced second language acquisition theories and the highly energetic, honestly sometimes chaotic reality of your future Taiwanese primary school classrooms. We're going to look at exactly how to get young, beginning learners to not just hear English, but truly listen to it. And, not just parrot phrases, but actually speak it with real purpose.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Taiwanese Classroom Challenge, move into decoding listening models, go from comprehension to acquisition, break down the minus principles, look at the 3 functions of spoken English, and finally wrap up with task-based learning and output.
Section 1. The Taiwanese Classroom Challenge, when students freeze up.
Okay, let's start with a really common reality. Picture this. You're playing an audio clip for your class, and suddenly your students completely freeze up just because they hear one single word they don't know. Or maybe you notice that a lot of textbooks focus heavily on transactional stuff like ordering food, rather than natural social skills like just making friends during recess. Well, this freeze-up response happens because kids tend to over-rely on decoding individual sounds and words. So to help them break through this wall, we absolutely need to deeply understand the mechanics of how the ear actually processes incoming language.
Section 2. Decoding listening. 2 processing models.
Let's look at the mechanics of how we actually process that incoming language. On the left, we have bottom-up processing. Think of it like assembling a puzzle piece by piece, decoding the sounds, finding the word boundaries, and working your way up to the meaning. In Taiwan, your students are going to get stuck right here a lot. To help them out, you can use micro-listening exercises to teach them how to identify reduced forms, like when want to blends into wanna. Now on the right is top-down processing. This is where you rely on background knowledge and contextual expectations. So the big takeaway here is that bottom-up is about decoding those micro-details, while top-down uses context. And successful listening in the real world, that's an interactive processing dynamic. You have to teach both of these simultaneously.
Absolutely crucial concept here is schema, or GMO. These are the mental frameworks we use to predict meaning in our everyday lives. If your students are freezing up on vocabulary, you can literally save them by activating their schema beforehand. So, for example, if your listening audio is about shopping, show them pictures of a bustling market during your pre-listening phase. You activate their existing knowledge about what happens at a store, which massively reduces their cognitive load and actually stops that freeze response before it even has a chance to start. Section 3. From comprehension to true acquisition, moving beyond just understanding.
You see, getting the basic gist of a message is really only phase 1. For language learning to actually stick permanently, the listener must move beyond basic comprehension. The noticing hypothesis tells us that input only becomes useful intake, or 吸收量, when the learner consciously notices a specific linguistic feature. Think of a new vocabulary word or a past tense ed ending. But how do we force this noticing? Well, try a classroom strategy like dictogloss. This is where students listen and then reconstruct a text from their notes. It pushes them to actually notice and use the specific language forms they just heard.
Section 4. Nations Minus Principles for Beginners, a checklist for young learners.
For your lower elementary beginners, Paul Nation gives us an incredibly practical and reassuring framework. When you're designing your lesson plans, just use these minus principles as your professional checklist. M is for meaningful. Keep it relevant to the kids' actual lives. I is for interesting, which means bringing in real physical objects or realia and using body movement. N is for new language, and the golden rule here is learn a little, use a lot, so you avoid overloading them. U stands for understanding, ensuring the input is grasped, often through total physical response or TPR. And finally, S stands for stress-free. Create a safe environment, and whatever you do, don't force early speaking before they are completely ready.
Section 5. 3 functions of spoken English. Richard's framework.
Okay, shifting our focus away from the ear and over to the voice, we have to distinguish exactly what kind of talk you're trying to teach. Richard's framework of spoken English clearly contrasts these goals. Notice how in our textbooks, we often overteach transaction, things like ordering a hamburger or asking for directions, where the focus is purely on exchanging information. But we desperately need to teach interaction. This is highly social. It's the small talk kids use to make friends. You can teach this by showing them back-channeling phrases like really or I see. And finally, there's performance, like giving a class report in front of everyone. This requires heavy scaffolding and rehearsal, very much like writing a draft.
Section 6. Task-based learning and output, from broken to fluent English.
So, how do we structure an entire lesson to push students from basic, fragmented communication all the way to accurate, fluent English. The secret ingredient in Nunan and Willis's approach is pushed output, or 被推动的产出. Look, when students just want to get meaning across, they rely on simple semantics. But when they are required to relay a precise message to an audience, they are pushed into syntactic processing. This means they are suddenly forced to care about how they actually structure their sentences, breaking them out of that comfortable language plateau.
Let's walk through the task-based learning cycle to see how this works in action. Step 1 is the pre-task, where you introduce the theme and the essential vocabulary. Step 2 is the task phase. Here, students attempt the task freely in pairs. Now, the absolutely critical key here is that the teacher monitors but does not correct errors yet. You have to let them struggle and succeed on their own. Step 3 is planning and report, where they prepare to tell the class their results. This is exactly where that pushed output happens, because they suddenly care about accuracy since an audience is listening. And finally, step 4 is the language focus, where you highlight the specific grammar or pronunciation issues you noticed earlier in the cycle. Try using these highly practical techniques in your future classrooms to get your students talking. Information gap tasks, like find the differences, are fantastic because they literally force the negotiation of meaning. The students absolutely have to communicate to complete the task. Then there's the 4-3-2 activity. This builds incredible fluency and automaticity by having a student talk about a topic for 4 minutes, then 3 minutes, and then 2 minutes to different partners. It speeds up their word retrieval process like crazy. And what is it, where you describe an object and students guess, is just the perfect, cute, low-stress game for building meaning.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want you to consider this pedagogical puzzle for your future classroom. Based on the task-based learning cycle's really delicate balance of fluency and accuracy, if a student makes a major grammar mistake while speaking to a partner during the task phase, should you jump in and stop them? Really think about it. Why is it so much better to hold your corrections until that final language focus phase? If you interrupt them mid-thought, what happens to their confidence, their fluency, and their willingness to take risks? Mastering the art of knowing exactly when to step in, and maybe more importantly, when to step back, is exactly what will transform you from a good instructor into a truly great teacher. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.